section B at the
Yeah.
bottom.
Where
Section
it
B.
says,
What
in addition
page
to the
five?
general standards.
When you have you have a non-conforming accessory dwelling unit that's already exists. Okay, you have a detached garage, you have a detached in-law quarters that already exist. It says in number 3,
Excuse me, Kevin, where are you?
page 5,
Page 5.
Bottom of page 5.
B, in section 5102. It says an applicant, on number 3, an applicant for a certificate.
All the way at the bottom, Mike.
Yeah,
I got it.
of reoccupancy of existing non-conforming accessory dwelling unit must include an affidavit from an applicant that attests that the unit will only be rented for an affordable rate. Why would we dictate that? It's new, why would we dictate that to a property owner, if you have a detached garage in an area next to Johnson and Wales and you can get $1,200, but because it's non-conforming, it's been around for 30, 40 years, you can only rent it, according to Dade County standards, would be about $350. I don't like giving property owners, telling somebody with their houses who or what you can rent, what the market is, and it's just, it may have been there for a long time, but I don't know why it's there, that it has to be extremely low or very low. There's not that many of these houses, these detached facilities
Which
around.
also brings up, if we want to go back further, some of these additions, you will recall, were called mother-in-law additions.
In-law.
In-law.
additions, Yeah.
In-law additions. Now, are we restricting, that was one of my questions, now that you brought that up, and I can now strike it off my list, is how do we address that if we're saying that it has, we're not explaining the existing dwelling if it's only used for that and not for rental?
It's a non-conforming accessory in
Non-conforming.
this case.
Yeah, but so, it's not conforming if it's an in-law
Right,
dwelling,
right,
correct?
and it's family members,
what-
they should be allowed to
Right,
to
so
use it.
family members should be allowed in there if we're gonna allow them to use it as a rental space if it's not conforming.
And I think
Well-
I don't know, the chairman has a detached garage in his house or unit. If, I don't think you rent it, but if you did, you should be able to pick who you want to live in that particular and what your rent is going to be. You shouldn't have to go to the city and give an affidavit. Okay, I found the lowest income possible person according to Dade County standards to rent the facility in the back of my
Well,
yard.
in this discussion, Nixon, you may want, there was also where they've struck except in the R1 district. So the R1 district is now included in this, and you can't rent that property in the R1 district.
Right,
So that's a violation of short-term rentals. And so we,
The reason why we struck that, because we do have some single family in other zoning district,
Right.
not just the R1.
Not just
not-
R1,
The
right.
R2 also, we have the same issues. Because those short-term rentals are not just in the R1.
I understand, but,
Yeah.
so but we've included R1 in this section, where it was excluded originally, and we've struck through that to now include it back into this, which seems to be incorrect.
I mean, because we do have some in the R1 as well.
not as rentals.
Not as
No,
rental.
short-term
And
rentals.
you're addressing that as rental
No,
units
not in
in
the
this. in
accessory
this-
dwelling.
Oh, no, the accessory dwelling, okay, yeah.
Yep.
Right,
The,
so you need to put that language back in,
No,
correct?
but I think you may want to address that.
And the only exceptions in the R1 district, I mean, for short-term rentals are not allowed, and the grandfathered homes were
Yeah, exactly.
literally a handful,
Yeah.
and they're dying off.
No,
over
yeah,
time.
yeah, no, to your point, I think Debbie might want to provide a.
one of the
Yes, sir.
things that you have to remember is that this was adjusted because of Florida statute and how it governs accessory dwelling units.
ADUs, yeah.
Yeah, but that,
So there's some major limitations. Okay. Nixon, I'm gonna let you step into here because you and I had this conversation before.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to share our part of our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, because this language is really essentially from the Florida statute. I mean, because, when you have to provide accessory dwelling units, it's to address, the affordability crisis in the state. And that's why, the specific language as far as, whoever meet that definition of low, very low income, that's basically to meet that statutory requirements. And I think, so that's why, as we were revising the code, so we have to make sure that code not only is consistent with our complaint, but also existing, Florida state statute. And then I don't have the statute in front of me. I think, if you can check on the computer, the one that deal with accessory dwelling units. And basically, that's what we're trying to do, to mirror that language here, to be consistent with that.
But why
So
does
first,
that
you're gonna have to
standard
exclude
apply
R1
here?
and R2.
Why does that standard apply here?
I mean, which
I mean, could they just rent to market rate?
it's based on the Florida statute, based on
No,
our
but
access.
does the Florida statute impose a requirement
Yes.
Yes,
that a non-conforming accessory dwelling
It's
unit
not just non-conforming, we're talking about an accessory dwelling units in general.
can only be
Yes, access, yes.
rented to below rate?
no, it's low, it's
Low-
low, very low, and moderate.
Those categories are described in the Florida statutes, yeah. Low, very low, and extreme low, yeah.
Just to clarify, it's not just
Miami-Dade.
non-conforming.
No, for ADU in general, accessory dwelling units.
Conforming and non-conforming,
Conforming or
which we don't
non-conforming.
really explain that in this.
Right. And the other issue, is
Yeah.
that all of a sudden, these in-law quarters that were built permanently, that they were built with permits and they were allowed and they existed all these years, and all of a sudden we changed our code to say that we don't want in-law quarters anymore, so your unit is now non-conforming. But it was built, permitted, it was allowed, you got your mortgages based on that square footage, but now it's non-conforming.
This is
So
new
we
language.
created
This is
our
new
own
Wait, wait.
restriction.
Well,
This
not
is
really.
not
I think
new
what
language.
staff is
No,
saying.
I know, but doesn't mean it was the right language. That's why we review stuff. It doesn't mean it was, from years ago that was the right language.
Maybe looking at grandfathering in those that already have those units?
That those buildings that have
Those
been
units
built
were already
properly with
grandfathered.
permits, they should be, they should be the status of a permitted, use, not a non-conforming, putting that tag on them that, they did something wrong. So,
I mean, if the units are already being grandfathered in, then
well, then we're labeling them non-conforming. So we're saying, they're allowed, they're grandfathered in because they were built under proper codes, but now because we don't allow them, you turn around and say they're non-conforming, so,
but those that are grandfathered in wouldn't be categorized as non-conforming.
yeah, they
correct?
would be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
On
they
everything.
They are, and they're allowed to continue as non-conforming.
Well, that
If
language,
they're
Keep
not
going.
on the list, they can't exist.
that language is on
They-
page 23,
I guess to my point, well,
section
what is the
E.
argument if they're?
Yeah, I
So
don't
we're having
understand that.
conflicting languages, Bob?
Well, that's, except for grandfathered accessory dwelling units and provided in this subsection, no plumbing shall be provided. That's so you've got grandfathered capabilities for creating the mother-in-law house,
Right.
whatever you wanna call it.
But if you have a non-conforming mother-in-law quarters, and it's in an area where rentals were allowed, if they are, I don't know if they are or not, I'm not talking about in the R1, but say they're in the R2 or R3, a single-family home with an accessory, you can only rent it to a particular category of people. And that's the issue, why are we defining a structure in somebody's backyard, which isn't in the commercial, we're not talking about multifamily buildings, we're not talking about, somebody who's in the apartment building, you're talking about an attached dwelling unit to your home. And so I just thought that was, if it's state statute, it's state statute, but I think we're applying it to something that was already legal within the city. Maybe the issue is that we're tagging those units as non-conforming and creating that kind of an issue.
So your issue is not the structure itself, but it's how it's being used or how the.
I think it should be used, and if I have I don't, but if I had a non-conforming accessory mother-in-law quarters, and I wanted to rent my mother-in-law, charge her money, she would have to be the low income, and have to sign an affidavit and all that other kind of stuff. I just think it's very burdensome to do that, and why would you require such a thing?
That'd be messed up if you charge
Yeah.
your mother-in-law too.
3 times, 4 times more.
Well, is the language, Nixon, is the language there in conflict
Bob speak.
with this other section later?
Below market?
It says, except as provided in section E below, which as I just mentioned, unattached accessory structures shall not be used as a living area or occupied as dwelling units, period.
Unless otherwise grandfathered.
I'm sorry.
You're on page, I'm
The
on
deputy
page
city attorney
23,
found the statute.
section
Right.
Oh, good.
Ex-
D.
Right, except for grandfathered accessory dwelling units.
And
So
they
now
supposedly
over
have a
here-
magic
That's
list.
the exception. So you're
Right.
saying this now refers to the exception?
Correct.
Exactly,
So now
yeah.
this explains that exception that
Those,
is
you know,
referenced
this-
over here.
Yeah.
Since they're giving you an exception, now you gotta rent to who we tell you can rent it to. You can't rent it to who you want to rent it to.
But it
those-
can't be
those are
rented in
existing
R1 or
regulations.
R2 anyway, and there is no more R3.
Right.
All right, let me hear
But
from
we
Mike.
have- Yeah, but what we've done though, Kevin, is we've eliminated the language for R1, and I think that's where we began this discussion. So we have to reinsert the language for R1 and R2, correct? In order for this,
Because those can't be
To-
rented.
so that we say that they cannot be rented, or that, see, that's where you're mixing up the restrictions on what you can charge and whether or not you can in fact rent the unit. So we need to get clarification as to, are we allowing it to be rented, or are we saying that?
My
no, you
thought
can't,
is
but you
that
can
we
try-
should
yeah.
allow detached garage, we should allow mother-in-law quarters, and if your mother-in-law's not in there and you rent it to a college student, personally, I say rent it out, and like every other major city does, but that's something you all will have to address, and I don't know why we have an aversion to detached garages, because Boca has them, and people rent, not Boca, but there's other places in Fort Lauderdale, massive areas that have detached garages
So
with
we're-
living quarters, but we don't allow that, so.
We're eliminating the concept of
All right,
single-family
yeah, all
residence.
right, let me hear from Mike.
Question. Where is this magical list in the city manager's office? Cause I know a lot of people that have,
It does exist.
huh?
It does exist.
It does? Well, I
That,
don't think anybody-
was done by a
but I
city
don't-
manager Patterson when he
But
was
I
here.
don't think anybody in the city knows about it.
I mean,
because-
it's available.
I mean, there's a lot of people I know who have relatives living in detached.
Mike,
attached
your
areas.
microphone?
I know a lot of people who have, friends and relatives living in small detached units that used to be garages and et cetera. And I'll guarantee if I were to poll them, nobody knows about no list that they're supposed to be on.
But the list, that's a different situation, Mike. The list that exists is homes in residential our short-term rental prohibition says you can't rent for less than 3 months in a residential neighborhood,
Yeah.
or 4 times in a year.
Okay.
And there's a handful of 5 homes, 6 homes, I think, at the time, that were exceptions because they existed prior to the prohibition going in place. So those are the only homes that were made as an exception.
There's only 5 homes?
There was 5, I think there were 6.
But those are renting the whole houses, they
They're
were
renting
party
out the whole
houses.
house.
It was the whole
You
house, not a
couldn't rent-
room.
In single-family neighborhoods, if you've got a second kitchen, you've got to show cause. And it's the fact that there's not another family living in there because it's a single-family dwelling. Because if you go over to Miami Beach, people have subdivided 9 bedrooms into
right. Yeah,
hotel
yeah.
rooms. And that's all.
And that's not what we want here, but we have existing
This is
Well,
the
it's a
detached
single-
structures
My
in this
argument
city.
would be it's a single-family residence. Now, whether you rent it out, you can't rent it out for less than 3 months, but that's the entire home. But to start renting out rooms,
We're talking about a detached structure like an old garage.
it's a single-family home is the point, right? Now, it's not a single-family home.
All right, let me hear from Jennifer, our deputy city attorney. I believe she's got something to enlighten us here.
Yes, I've actually pulled up the Florida statute in reference and which governs accessory dwelling units. It's Florida statute 163.31771. It defines accessory dwelling units, but even more importantly, it provides that upon a finding by a local government that there is a shortage of affordable rentals within its jurisdiction, the local government may adopt an ordinance to allow accessory dwelling units in any area zoned for single-family residential use. if the local government adopts an ordinance, an application for a building permit to construct an accessory dwelling unit must include an affidavit from the applicant which attests that the unit will be rented at an affordable rate to an extremely low income, very low income, or moderate income person or persons. I'll
That
bring
sounds
the
like new con-
commissioner's attention back to the actual language that's up for debate. This is quite old language. This is not anything new that is being presented to you for consideration. It is my understanding that the city's decision to allow accessory dwelling structures in the city came directly from this ordinance. That's my understanding from staff, is that it was a policy decision by the city to adopt by ordinance this language to allow accessory dwelling structures, but to conform with Florida statute only for an affordable use purpose.
Jennifer, that sounded like new construction.
No.
Was that statute?
No.
No.
Allow a
ADU.
building
No.
permit?
No.
No, it
Anytime
says
you
each accessory dwelling unit allowed by an ordinance adopted under the section shall apply towards satisfying the affordable housing component of the housing element of the local government's comprehensive plan. So,
We adopted that.
basically what I read this statute to say is you cities can allow these accessory dwelling structures, but if you do, it has to meet this affordable housing requirement, and that's what the city has done.
But Section 5, 112, page 23 says, except as provided in the section below, which is grandfathered accessory dwellings, unattached accessory structures shall not be used as a living area or occupied as dwelling units. And that's the current language, and it doesn't seem ambiguous.
It sounds like a conflict.
Where was that?
Page 23, section D.
D.
It's section 5112, section D, which refers to section E immediately below it.
And then I see what you're saying. I think maybe when the last LDR was adopted, I think ADU was made. They probably prohibit any more accessory dwelling units. That's why make them give them that non-conforming status. So
Right.
for those who were grandfathered in as a result of the changes in the LDR back then, so they may allow to continue. However, any new other accessory structure should not have any plumbing, sort of plumbing or kitchen area, which would qualify them as accessory dwelling units. And that's what that language really meant. I don't think there's really a confusion. I think that's what that, because if you have if you provide like a storage area, you say it's for storage as an accessory use or detached garage, you shouldn't have any plumbing in it. So that's why we add that additional language.
But that's the second part. It talks about the plumbing. But this just says unattached structures, accessory structures, shall not be used as a living area. It does, I mean, if you don't even have any plumbing, you can't use it as a living area.
But it could be a playhouse or like something like that.
Yes,
sort.
yes, but once you put that, because those are one of the things, it becomes a code compliance issue. Because people come in and apply for a permit, this is just for storage. And then they have plumbing. And the next thing code enforcement, and there's a family living in there. Or they rent it out. And then this is why we add that, if you look on the page 4, we add that additional language because of all those issues code compliance is having in dealing with those things.
And to follow up on that, on legal counsel, just working on it day to day, we do utilize that language in enforcement. So when we say that we require an affidavit, what we're really requiring of these people is when they come in for their certificate of reoccupancy, we have them recorded in the official records what the use is and that they're complying with the
Declaration of
statute.
use.
And it's very easy for our code compliance officers to coordinate with our department and see which ones are legalized and which ones are not.
Exactly.
And so the heart of this language is currently in effect in enforcement with code compliance as well as CP&D.
So those that are grandfathered in can use the units for that.
Exactly.
Those that are not cannot use the units
Cannot,
for that.
Right.
exactly.
And chances are those that have been grandfathered in are not going to be
Mike.
renting,
Mike.
are not going to be renting to wealthy people. So they will fall under the low income, moderate income, so on and so forth. So I don't see the
Well,
need to
the
change the language.
The question
I may
is,
be
do we
wrong,
need
but-
to maintain the requirement or allow a change to market rate? And it sounds from the statute that we need to maintain the requirement.
I don't see a need to change it.
Yeah. If there's a state statute that says you have to do it that way, then
Yeah.
you have to do it that way. But it comes across as something that staff is just recommending. It says, and
Maybe
you're
we
only
can-
defining what low income is according to Dade County, but you're not saying as per, you might want to insert as per
Yeah, that's what
Florida
the Florida
statute.
state statute, that's what I was gonna
So
say.
when somebody sees it, they go back and they look at the
Yeah.
Florida statute and says, okay, now I understand it's not just staff people, deciding to do
cite
that.
Yeah,
statute,
that's what I was going to suggest, that
City
maybe
of
at
Sacramento.
the end of it,
Okay.
you just,
Um,
or at the beginning, just restate that or state it. Yeah, the statute and maybe the statute number.
3177, I
Ju-
think it's 31771, right?
Noted as a reference, as per state statute,
Yeah,
yeah.
yes, the
Just,
state
just a
statute.
parenthetical
Either before
referring
or
to statute.
after it's stated,
All right.
the
Okay.
code is stated.
We don't even
All
need
right, so
language.
we're ready to accept the language per statute.
Well, what we have discussed is just adding a reference at the end and the parenthetical that refers to the statute as authority for whatever's here.
Okay,
So
fine.
there doesn't have to be a debate every time somebody reads it.
Exactly.
Sounds reasonable. All right. then.
Okay, I just got a couple more and I'm
Well,
gonna go
wait,
quick.
wait, Kevin. One at a time. Chair will call for a motion. So moved by Mr. Each, seconded by Ms. Boulay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next item.
Page
Kevin.
8, number 4.
We just passed that, Nixon. Now, what else could you possibly?
I want to enlighten, the commission. I just got that information,
Yes, I see light coming through the window.
Exactly.
The sun could be rising in the east.
We actually have 35, accessory dwelling units in the
Oh.
city, and they have a covenant in the building department.
So we're
So,
fine.
We're fine.
Okay.
So I'm just wanting to clarify.
No,
that.
no problem. All right, Kevin. Page 8.
Page 8, number 4. It's under, page 8, number 4. Only one canopy carport structure will be permitted, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but it says all sides must be open. If you look at any of the new carports, they have roll downs to protect the sun from your cars, but we have to have them all open. Why would we not allow somebody who just spent the money on a carport to have the roll down sides on them? Why? But why, we're saying they're not allowed. Why would they not be
Well, I
allowed?
think the intent there is not to have something become more permanent. If I bought a carport canopy that had a panel that rolled down, I don't see code enforcement citing me because it came with a roll down panel.
They would tell you that it's illegal.
Would they, Jennifer? We'll ask the deputy city attorney.
Can you please rephrase the question?
If it's not permanent, in other words, if it's not
This is
permanent, I don't think,
How you can phrase that is put a permit, with a permanent,
So there's nothing to block the sun out from your car that you just bought the awning for, and that you permitted
we
it.
understand
So
that.
It's
maybe
just-
you can add some language that says it has to be detachable or mobile or.
What you do is you drop the at all times. That's all. Strike through at all times. And then it's open
does
on
leave
all
it
sides,
open-ended
and you
to
drop down the
enforcement.
canopy,
You
the
guys may
sidewall
tighten
when
up
you
that
need to.
language if you would like.
Say it again?
It does leave it open to code enforcement, if you do have someone that's a habitual offender that is constantly leaving it open and it becomes an eyesore, definitely is something that will become an enforcement issue.
But we're telling them to leave it open, you see, that's the thing.
And that leaves it open to enforcement.
Which leaves it open to be an eyesore, whereas if you allow the side panel to just roll down, then, you have less of a problem with that.
Well, can you have 4 side panels?
This says none, but you
Well,
should
can you
have,
have
yeah,
4?
4, yeah.
And
why
now
not?
suddenly you got an inexpensive garage sitting out front?
They're not waterproof, they're not inexpensive. A carport, you're gonna park your
No,
car
but this
out
is
of
a
the sun.
canopy carport. I mean,
I
by
mean,
the
I mean,
very
it becomes-
definition.
Goes
it's-
from a
That part
carport
is
to a
just
tent,
like
right?
No.
Do you wanna call it a carport though? I mean, it's really not a carport.
It's being called a canopy, it's being called a canopy carport.
But then you allow that in the front.
It says
then
only
it
one
just become a
canopy
box in your
carport
front yard.
structure shall be permitted per resident.
Which is something with a canvas top and aluminum framing.
Right.
As opposed to a garage. that's,
Exactly.
Also, see, we're having problems with the definition because of how people can misconstrue it.
Mhm.
So, I
And-
think, there is language that needs to be to where that canopy carport can be a temporary, it's not really a permanent structure. Even though somebody uses it as a permanent structure, but in time, I mean, that thing's gonna blow away in a hurricane if there's no, there's no ordinance where we're addressing the fact that needs to be secured to the driveway or to the
You see,
land to keep
canvas
it.
carport.
Actually, on these canopy ones, they are really very strict building codes for them now.
Yeah.
And you actually have to bury them in a very deep, footer. It's not like we're not talking about the ones you get at Costco for
Right.
$99, those white ones. Those are illegal everywhere, but
Yeah, but now I've
they're here.
seen,
We're talking about the other ones that, a nice awning, and you roll it down. My next door neighbor has the awning, and he has an antique Mustang in there, and he has trees to shade it because he can't have a roll down, or something
that's
clear, nice, something to block the sun out.
One point of,
Let me ask the attorney.
So
for the-
in Article 7, there's a definition which modifies this restriction, because you have to take them both, it's called in pari materia, you read them both together. And that one says, the carport shelter means a canopy or roof-like structure open on all sides if detached from the main building, or open on all sides except for those sides attached to the house, for the purpose of providing shelter for one or more motor vehicles. So first, if you tried to change it into like a storage unit, you couldn't, because it's only for storing vehicles. And if it's attached to a house, one of the sides can be permanently down.
the other point to remember is this is existing relocated language.
Well, see, here's the thing that I look at now. My lot is only 67 and a half feet wide. Not a big piece of property. Now, if you go back to the original microfilmed plan of that property, it was originally drawn with a built-in carport. They never actually built the carport. I wish they had, but they never did, okay? But if you go back to the really old site record, it showed the house with a carport. Now, moving ahead today, we probably couldn't build the carport because we wouldn't meet the setback requirements.
It all depends.
Yeah, I know, there'd be a little waffle room there, and if I actually came into a bundle of money and went to you with a plan for a carport, if there's enough money invested, you'd let me build it, I'm sure. But let's talk about what happens with the canopy now. We get one of these canopies that's 20 feet long, A-frame, okay, white or whatever, and it ships with side panels, which I don't have to put down, but it ships with them, and it's part of the deal. So, because it's separated from the house by a distance of maybe 8 feet or maybe 6 feet, it's not attached to the house. It's not up against the side of the house. So we have this interesting situation. Would I be allowed to use the side panels? Here I've got this freestanding canopy that's just, 10 feet wide or 11 feet wide, enough for a car to slip in without knocking over the pipes, if you haven't had too much to drink late at night. And you park this thing. Well, am I then subject to code enforcement if I choose to drop my side panels for whatever earthly reason, since I have them,
All right, so where are we at?
You see?
Let's say it's a policy decision and you make a recommendation to the city council.
Yeah, so
Because right now, if you do that, that would qualify it as a tent, and then which is prohibited.
you see, and that's an interesting thing, is when do you go from a canopy to a tent?
When you have the panels down.
But how many panels do you have to put down?
I mean, it has to be open on all sides, all sides.
So, you see, this creates
Not
a really weird conflict in language. I think if we
Or
drop the
contentious
at all
occupancy
times,
is not
we're
for
probably somewhat better off.
And then you'd have to modify the definition as well.
as well.
As remember, now, this is existing language, it's just been slightly tweaked. You've always had this same language in here about these carport structures, as they were called. And they were there already, and it said they had to be open on all sides. So none of that has changed, it's just been relocated, and it's now called a canopy carport structure to actually match the definition in chapter 7.
And-
Article 7, sorry.
And I'll go back to the same thing, just because it's written, that's why we're reviewing things, because rules and regulations, and you find mistakes. Just because you've cut and pasted something old and dropped it back in here doesn't make it right. But if I buy an awning and it's tied down with the not
String,
the-
yeah.
with the string and all that, and it's professionally put
It's
up.
an A-frame
And
structure.
I want to do a roll thing up and down, I shouldn't get cited by code enforcement because I want to protect whatever vehicle I put underneath there. That's the purpose of a thing. You roll it up and you roll it down. It's not a permanent wall.
the rollers in there. Let's
So
put
do
language
you-
in there for the rollers.
Do you want to make that change?
But why would you prohibit, whatever the canvas company, makes, the carport people make, so.
Well,
Because
the
it's a
only,
carport.
the only language you might be able to put in there as a suggestion is that the canopy structure must have side panels that can be
And may have
adjusted
side
to be
panels.
rolled up or in some way not to be permanently down at all times, but
What-
must be movable,
There you go, movable side
movable
panels.
or
What if you just strike that last sentence? The canopy carport structure shall remain
well,
open
that's
at
what
all
Kevin had
sides.
suggested.
Just
as
strike that
well.
whole sentence out.
But then I don't know if that can still be left open for interpretation for code violation or
And we have to redefine the
If you do,
language, correct?
if you do what he suggested, strike the second sentence, you have to amend the definition.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's
Yes.
already in the definition
Right.
as well.
right.
Well, how
So, but whatever
complicated is
you
that?
decide, whether it's shall have temporary sides, which may be rolled up, something like that,
So
yeah.
that,
That's why we gotta
using
put
that
in there,
language
may
would
have,
have
Make
us
it a
to
design
redefine.
issue and
Movable
not
side
a
panels.
condition issue.
So using the language that you just said we would not have to redefine.
No,
the
you
language
have
if
to.
we-
No,
if
you would
we
have
had
to.
You have to
yes.
redefine.
So if
Yeah.
we use that language, we would have to redefine. the
Yeah,
language.
and, I mean.
It's a
you-
carport.
it's
And
okay.
then you're going to have to modify the
carport.
definition of canopy,
Build a garage.
because now it becomes a tent.
I mean, I can see
What?
why. I mean,
And
stormwater
tents are
things
prohibited.
out there.
Now, can you imagine what a resident is going through because they just got cited because they have
Yeah,
Have to
a
modify.
little carport?
But Kevin, I mean, I want to look beyond that, and I think the fact that could be neglected very easily. Somebody could just leave it down all the time and say,
Right.
yeah, I've got one that's portable. And then that code enforcement officer could be out there 8 times a week because the guy can always tell him, well, I had it up yesterday, but I had to close
Exactly.
it again. But,
So to clarify,
yeah, I'm beginning to see where staff is going with this because somebody's gonna use that as a repair garage.
this.
And that's what they're
Ca-
trying to avoid.
Canopy-
And I believe it's a carport.
And I believe
It's
it
fine
becomes a
just like it
carport.
is.
Canopy carport is not a soft covered carport.
Right.
It's a fixed roof carport.
No, it's canopy. It's soft.
No,
canopy.
the definition of canopy is fixed roof-like structure, not movable like an awning. So when you say canopy
Wow.
carport, by definition, it's not a soft covered carport.
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
because the canopy stays permanent. It's stitched and laced all around the
No,
frame.
No.
By his definition.
But he's right,
I'm
because
just
I've
reading
seen,
the
standard
code.
carport.
That's
I'm
a
not making
standard
this stuff
As
up.
we all understand it.
right.
It's a hard roof carport.
But
Not
then
a
there's a
hardcover.
Are we
canvas
gonna argue about this all
carport
night?
Right.
definition.
Yeah, canvas.
There's a canvas carport which says the cover of which structure is made of canvas. That's not what this other provision in paragraph 4 says.
So we now have two different scenarios here that we're looking at. A
Right.
canvas cover that people use to keep their car covered from the sun, but as Mr. Held has just pointed out, that there are canopy carports that are permanent structures. I've seen them, I have
permanent
one in my
roofs.
neighborhood. That is
You
just
can put a
it's an
definition in there,
aluminum
the side
covered.
panels can be used during, when the sun is out. or inclement weather.
You
That's
know,
it.
we have a thing here.
Sorry.
I'm gonna suggest something totally radical at the moment, guys. We could debate this till the cows come home. How many citations have we had on this problem?
Oh, there,
I mean,
I've
We
yet
haven't,
to,
have
I've
we?
yet to have prosecuted one, Mr. Chairman.
One.
I've
And
yet to have prosecuted.
you have yet to prosecute one. So, you know, let's skip this whole thing for now.
Okay, we'll skip
Because
it.
I don't see this as a win-win no matter how we try to explain this. The more we try to include, the more we wind up excluding. And I don't see any point in paying attorney's fees to litigate this issue if we've never prosecuted one in the city. Let's wait and see if an issue comes up, then we'll sit down and negotiate, I hope, rather than sue, and we'll sit down and work something out. Let's move on. We're not gonna solve this one.
Okay, we'll just move on real quick. There's a blanket prohibition in the NROs for drive-throughs. Page 10, number 5-104.
Well, it's actually 105 now, isn't it?
It's,
it's changed
it
to
goes to
105 now.
page
No,
10.
no, it's
That
actually
article-
on your page 9.
that's on the
Oh,
design.
it's on our page 9.
It's in 5-104, drive-throughs, walk-up
Okay.
windows.
Oh, I see, okay.
And then it goes over to the top of page 10, number I, letter I.
Letter I. We just have a blanket, no drive-through in the NRO, which is a very substantial size of our redevelopment area. I just was questioning why that was arbitrarily, and I would say arbitrarily, why that blanket is not allowed.
no, this is new.
If it's a bank or if it's a
It's
restaurant
being moved.
or Walgreens, why would we not allow a drive-through? If it's a Starbucks, it's just a blanket no drive-through unless you're already there. I just,
What letter is that, Kevin?
it's letter I,
Page 10.
page 10.
EFGHI, okay.
And the NRO is the neighborhood redevelopment overlay, and it's quite a large area. And it just stood out to me why we just had a blanket no.
So what were we thinking?
Why don't we
And-
just strike it?
Why have it?
Well, let's
No,
ask
he
the
has a
planner,
point.
if the planner knows why that's in there.
Maybe in the PCD, he has a point.
There must have been discussion between the planner and the staff. Somebody must have had a problem.
I believe it was to make it consistent with what was not allowed in the NRO
NRO
itself,
Itself, yeah.
in the district itself. Bear with me just a moment, let me get over there,
Yeah, you have to go back to Article 4.
right?
Special purpose. Because if you go under that article, drive-through was a prohibited use within the NRO.
What, you want, a bottle of water?
So as we, go to the accessory use, the Article 5, we try to include that language to mirror what was in Article 4 already. And I can see, Mr. Burns' point, because the NRO is in a vast area. And then you may have a Walgreens, maybe around like 131st Street. But then again, the intent of the NRO to promote a pedestrian-friendly area. But then, I mean, there's two sides of the argument. Then maybe on the major corridor where you want people to to create, foot traffic, you may not want to allow it there, but at least in some other part of the NRO, away from the downtown, from the core, then that can, something we can look at. My
So what you're
humble
saying
opinion.
is there might be wiggle room for a special exception.
Yeah, special exception, maybe that on a case-by-case basis.
So look at the chart on page 2, where it's allowed and where it's not allowed.
Page 2.
Right, in Article 5.
5.
Yeah.
So page 2 now. We go back to page 2. Drive-through facilities.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a special exception in the PCUD, the PCD, the AOD. It's permitted in the PD. Special exception in C3, C2BW, C2BE, and
Yeah, I think it
C1.
should be special.
it's,
Special exception.
so put a special exception or permitted or let somebody at least have the opportunity to do it, not just have a blanket no.
Right, so you've got an allowance for special exception.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then they can make sure it
then
works
there's
with
no
the
reason
neighborhood.
to debate the issue.
Okay.
Yeah, but now, do we strike that, do we strike I
Go back,
altogether?
yeah, into Article
Have
4
to go
now.
back here now, hold on a
Yeah, so we
second.
have to change it if we
So we
put in a
need,
special
we
exception.
would need to put, that would definitely require some level of review, so it should be a special exception at a minimum.
At a minimum, yeah.
On page 2 to your table. And then when we go back over, I'm sorry, what was that page again? Kevin?
9,
Page
Fine.
10,
Top
9,
of
10.
page 10.
top of page 10.
We need to revise that language to either allow it,
You can just strike it.
yeah, there you go, thank you,
Strike it.
Jared.
Already in the chart.
Please.
Yep,
all right, so we're striking I,
strike I
okay.
and revise the table on page 2. So that would be your motion.
Well, the table is good, right? What are we changing with?
And-
We'd
and
have
then-
to add it as
You're
a
adding it to
special,
the table, special
we-
exception.
Wait, what-
special exception in the NRO.
In the NRO,
Yeah, under Article,
so,
Section 4
okay, so all we're doing is putting in special exception in the NRO.
Fine,
Right.
yes. What-
All right,
No, Mr. Chair, we do have to go to Article 4, Section 4-305-2, on the prohibited use where it says drive-through. So, and strike that.
What page?
Page 30
of section 4,
of Section 4.
section 4, page 30.
'Cause-
Let's try to be consistent, this is maddening, but if we get this right, there'll be
Go
fewer
down there.
issues for the city council
Right in
to
the
quibble
middle.
over.
Oh,
Page
drive-through,
30 where?
strike that?
Page 30,
It's
section
on the
4,
prohibited use.
prohibited uses drive-throughs, because we're gonna strike that, because we're allowing
the
special
prohibited.
exceptions.
Article 4.
So it's
Yeah,
C2.
Article 4, item 2, page 30, minor thing.
Yeah, but no, we do not have to vote on, do we have to vote on that?
Well, we need a motion to adopt these changes.
All right,
Yeah.
motion to adopt the change in Article 4 regarding,
Striking drive-through,
striking drive-through.
and in Article 5, adding special exception to the NRO.
Do we have to vote on each article?
No, we can do
all
this
together.
in combination.
All right, thank you.
And on page 10, striking I at the top of the page.
Second.
All right, that's our motion, and Mr. Ernst, you make the motion?
Yes, I've made a motion.
All right, Mike seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Hallelujah.
And then item number 3 on page 20.
How many of these do you have?
Say it one more time, Kevin.
We're gonna,
Yeah,
we're
not to cut you
Page
short, but
20, Article.
20?
some of these things I have listed, Bob may have listed, and so I don't know if we wanna expedite by one of us.
How many more do you
How
have?
many
I have
do you-
about 3 more, and I'm dissecting them, and I'm doing real quick.
Okay,
Because,
Okay.
you know, the sun will be rising in the east.
The next one is on page 20, number 3. We have a blanket prohibition against pass-through windows at restaurants or to service patrons. If we just talked about we want walking traffic in the NRO and we want pedestrians,
That's
people
been
walk up to
that's been
windows.
stricken.
That's
Huh?
been stricken.
Oh,
Yeah,
is
that's
that, oh,
been
that's
stricken.
stricken, okay.
Right, right.
So-
Sorry about that.
Move on to the next one.
Next one
Kevin.
is right below it, number 6. It
Number-
says, it's about plants, same page, 20. Plants such as next door at the restaurant, we have Cafe Creme. They use plants as a border to define their space. The way this is read is that you can't use it if the public can't freely go in there and use those tables. Well, you're a restaurant. I mean, why would we restrict no
Yeah,
perimeter
I see
structure?
what you're saying, you see.
You know,
That,
yeah.
that's, I can see the fences and railings, but planters have to be allowed.
Yeah, little planters, they're rollable, you put
Yeah.
them on each side of your, like the pizza restaurant, they put them on each
And
side.
people like to sit around greenery, so
Exactly.
planters should be permitted.
All right, Mr. Chairman, in, Article 6, to strike the word, planters.
B6, page 20, we strike the word planters. That's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kenny. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, fine.
you have one more.
2 more, right? Okay, another one is page 23, number C, under 5.112. It's just the size of sheds. we only allow a 10 by 12. The standard shed that people are buying, according to Ted Sheds and Home Depot and all that, because I called up, is 12 by 15s because people are hoarding all this garbage. It doesn't help the new mini storage building, but people hoard stuff. The 10 by 12s are obsolete.
Well, the fact is, we're a consumer society. We want
Yeah.
people to go out and spend
Page
and
23.
buy and keep all that stuff.
So we have 120 square feet, which is outdated anymore. And you can get a permit to get bigger, but that again, more money, people have to come up, pay the city, go through the whole process. Checking around other cities and what the most common thing is up to 240 feet. But there's another section we have down here where we allow 400 feet, and I'm not asking for that on another building. That's why, but the 240 is a common standard. Ted Shed delivery, Home Depot delivery is the more basic size that gets delivered. So
It's 60 by 40?
no,
square.
no,
10 by 12.
it's 240 square feet, which could be a 12 by 12, a 12 by, it's 12 by 12 or 12 by 15 or 12 by 16 is the standard size.
Okay.
But looking at what other cities, that's the maximum you could do.
Staff, where did you get your numbers, Nixon? where
No,
you
no,
came up?
those are existing numbers.
They've been in there for 20 years.
All
Okay,
right.
so
And-
standards
so-
have changed.
I mean, what I would propose, even on the 400, it's really an arbitrary number. I mean, if it's a CBS structure, then it
Yeah.
has to be 400.
So-
But depends if you like, half an acre property or 1 acre property, And I think, what I would suggest, and I think maybe have a minimum rear yard lot coverage. So basically, you can only cover that amount of your rear yard, then that would deal with all those issues. I mean, what we do propose also for.
We do
this-
have that, Nixon.
Yeah, so we already have that. So I think we can eliminate those, and because even for the smaller sheds, that we propose reduced setbacks for them. Let's say we have another 8 by 10. This is not that intrusive to your neighbor. If it was a bigger shed, and sometimes, they like about 12, 14 foot high. So we do have, I think, with the rear yard coverage, that can help dealing with that instead of, setting up some, size, limits.
So you're
and
recommending we strike C?
so- I mean, that's enough.
Because they'll allow you to build a CBS brick building shed out of concrete, and you can go 400 square feet.
Yeah.
But to go buy a shed that's delivered
About
by
that
Home Depot
size.
shed, you can only go 120 feet. It makes no
It's an-
common sense.
All right, Chair needs a motion to strike C.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? All right, C is stricken.
Okay.
In that same section, if I may,
You may.
the maximum height of so people put a cheeky hut behind their house, and it can't be taller than 12 feet.
But with Cheeky Hut, because it's with the
Or somebody builds an outdoor kitchen.
no, all they need from us is really zoning, whether or not they can do it. I mean, but I don't know, Jennifer, you want to
Well,
chime in on?
do you calculate pitched roof separately, like so that?
I mean,
point.
as long as they within that district requirement, I don't know if you dealt with that, Debbie, for Cheeky Hut, because they have different requirements. 'Cause
Those
they-
are exempted
wasn't
from
doing
our,
the explicit
they're exempted from our code or the
Yeah.
Florida Building Code because of the
Because-
sovereign nation
Sovereign nation.
applicability to the tiki
Tiki
hut.
hut.
Just
Yeah.
for tiki huts that are built by,
The Indians.
With
Exactly.
the Indian Seminole.
there are contractors who do these tiki huts that they are not
They
exempt.
exempt from our building.
Let me go back, if I may, to the shed size. Many communities have a limitation on these sheds because they get to be rather, overwhelming. But they also have a limitation on the shed sides because they require, the building code after a certain, I think it's 100 square
100,
feet, requires certain tie downs, certain installation requirements. And so then they want to make sure you get a permit for those type of things,
Right.
over 100 square feet. And this prohibition is just straight up says it can't exceed 120 square feet. So one thought may be that you may want to consider down the line, or maybe now, is that anything over 100 square feet as a prefabricated shed meets all the installation requirements of the Florida Building Code.
No, but they would have to get a building permit anyway.
Exactly, that's true.
It's already
Good
required.
point.
It's already required, and then when they bring
Excellent.
the NOA, and then they would have all the, wind load calculation and everything.
It's gotta be
So
Dade County approved
they
and all that
gotta
other
approve,
stuff.
so it's already a requirement. So when they buy that, whether at Walmart, Home Depot, wherever they buy, so they still have to go through it.
And I'm gonna drop off a bunch of other things. There's something, on page 124, letter G. It's about driveways.
124.
Let's see what this section. Section 51401.
Which is actually, is it the,
It's the material driveway parking areas.
that's a
Letter
renumbering issue.
G.
It should be I, but yeah.
Where are we at?
It's gonna be
Page
page
one.
124,
Page 124, a letter G on my book. It might be I on yours.
right,
124?
Yes.
page 124 in Article 5.
So what's the problem?
The issue with this is that when we did the LDRs 7 years ago, we gave people 7 years to come into compliance with this new driveway.
So we have to remove
So now you have this new driveway requirement, which was almost identical, and we're giving them an additional 7 years.
That's
So it's
what-
now 14 years, and nothing has happened, but do we still want to keep these requirements?
That was an oversight, and then we've already called
Yeah,
that,
I brought
that was
that
an
up to you,
oversight,
yeah.
yeah.
And we've already removed that as a ministerial error that was already removed prior to first reading.
So what
Oh, yeah,
is,
but we will remove it.
yeah, what's the language now? Because
Yeah, the
according to
last
this, I'm already in default because I have the concrete runners that were built in 2000 or 1999.
They were built when your
7
house
years
was
have
built.
passed.
probably.
And
so the
nobody
7
told me I had to get rid of them. I
So
didn't
did
know.
the city did a horrible job to tell you that you weren't allowed, aprons and the gravel, which I don't know now environmentally green, and you want portionless for the water to drain through. Do these type of for a single family home is different than what you would have for a multifamily building. A multifamily building, I would think you would want asphalt numbered parking spaces, but somebody's single family home, like your house, Kevin, who have the two,
the two.
concrete slabs should be those should be, allowed for your single family home, but not on multifamily, buildings. Kenny, in front of your, units, you're all
all paved.
asphalt and paved and striped and got your thing.
Well, it does say that if it is a single-family residence, that stuff can remain in perpetuity.
Exactly.
Oh,
It's
well,
only
so
applied
I'm
to anything.
grandfathered in.
No,
Essentially,
no,
single-family
gra-
homes are.
Single family
Single
homes.
family
Single-family
homes.
homes are. There is
No,
a
no gravel
distinction.
only, but strips have to be removed.
What?
Yeah.
What? Run that by me again.
No, gravel and concrete strips existing at the time of adoption of the LDRs for single-family dwellings shall be allowed to remain in perpetuity, provided
That
that
they are
they are
per-
properly
Yeah,
maintained.
should remain in perpetuity.
So
Yes,
I'm
yes,
not
good.
in
For
violation.
single
You are
family.
not in violation
You're
by
good.
virtue of you having a single-family home as long as you properly maintain it.
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful! I'm legal.
But what they did do, and does have to be removed, is they gave other properties only
It's
7
multi-
years to
Right.
come into compliance,
And the
so.
ideal is that since it's been
the
7
clock-
years,
it
that
has
7
to
years
go.
is up, and we kind of need to strike that
Suggestion
language
is
out.
strike that
No,
last
you
sentence.
sell your house to new owners.
So.
But you have to give people some who don't know, just moved into the city, they don't know that what we did 7 years ago,
So-
and
But
nobody
so strike
tells
the
them.
So when
last
does the
sentence.
7 years start from them being notified? that they
7
have
years
to-
has ended.
7 years,
The 7 years is
from
over.
the-
This has already been litigated and your past LDR adoption 7 years ago. You have already given them their 7 years. Their 7 years is up. They,
So, but how were they notified? Because
They-
that's a personal issue for me.
As
We were not
counsel to
properly
code
notified,
compliance-
and we were told that we would be given, the 7 years. So now that you're saying this is totally contrary to what the information that we were given. So I
As-
personally now have a problem with this language, so I need
Well,
some
may
So,
clarification.
just to take this to the extreme, does that now mean
They got 7 more years.
that we can cite Miss Boley,
They've already
lien
been
Miss Boley,
cited.
and
We
then
have a
foreclose
problem.
on the lien?
No,
Yeah.
not
No.
on her single-family home. What
Okay.
this means, and,
Just-
and
Yeah,
to
we
be
have a
quite
problem.
honest, there's already been active efforts on behalf of co-compliance to give all of these multifamily unit owners the opportunity to come into compliance. They have been going out there and letting them know that the 7 years has expired. There's already, been I don't want to say hordes, but a large amount of multifamily unit owners that have already come into compliance by the active efforts by code enforcement. So the 7 years is already expired, and most of our community is kind of already aware of it by virtue of the fact that they've been coming into compliance. There's
No,
not
they've
been a
cited.
I'm sorry?
You have a
I
multifamily?
personally have experienced this, and I brought this to the attention of I've made it known, and we were told that we would get those 7 years to be able to come into compliance. Now I'm hearing the 7 years are up, so. Now, I mean, that means that we're open to. I'm being
No,
told
it's
we're
a
not,
ministerial
we're not
error that
extending
it would have left in.
Excuse-
It was
I'm
supposed
a
to
little
have been
bit
stricken
confused.
through,
This
but
doesn't,
we're
this has
literally
nothing to
staff
do with
notified
R1,
that.
right?
We're
R1 or
removing
R2.
And we were not.
This is
we were not properly
multifamily.
Notified of it.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yes,
have
yes, all
the
right,
mic
all
for a
right.
second?
Let me hear from Kenny.
When we did these LDRs 7 years ago and Kevin was the mayor, I had this put in, okay? And the reason I had this put in is on rental
124G.
properties, not R1 or R2. And the reason I had it put in is some of these apartment buildings look like hell out there. They're gravel, they're full of ruts and everything else, and we need to have it paved. Excuse me. We need to have this stuff paved. And now, this is 7 years ago, and I still drive down Northeast 16th Avenue, or I go down 127th Street, and I see these apartments. They look like hell, and people are parking all over the place on the grass, on the dirt. And the whole idea behind this ordinance was to improve the quality of life and the appearance of our city.
No, but
And I don't think the clock should start running again now. These people should be, people should be saying, hey, you got 2 weeks to get it done, otherwise you're getting cited.
Well, then
End of
the
story.
city must be granting us the thousands of dollars that it's going to take to make these corrections. Because my mother had already paved her driveway, and the city cited her several times without properly notifying her of this ordinance. My mother had been living in this at her place of residence for almost 30 years now. I've already provided all the proof necessary to show that we were not properly notified of this. So the clock does not stop there. It needs to roll back. Something needs to happen. Pull it from the sky. I don't know.
That's a single-family
but
home, right?
I don't see how.
Ms. Bull, is it a
Peggy,
single
as
family
Because we
home?
were cited and we
All
were
right,
told that
question, please, Peggy.
Yes.
Is this a single-family home?
it is a single family
Well, that has
home, but we
nothing to
were
do with this
told-
ordinance.
But we were told that this language applied to us. So we came to the city to get clarification. We were cited several times
You may have,
in respect to this situation. So
language
I
is
just need some
clear.
clarification.
this doesn't
now.
apply to you.
Right.
In this particular
So does that mean the sites, the tickets and so on will be,
The second
credited to
sentence
us,
says
or-
you're allowed to maintain
As long as it's
gravel and
maintained.
concrete strip driveways as long as they're properly maintained.
because we have that. We have the circular driveway,
Okay,
but we were still cited.
well, that's not before this board. I mean,
I mean,
No, but I mean,
I just
I
wanna
mean,
make sure the
I just
residents
want
don't
to add
experience
this.
what we experienced.
And I do think, when those 7 years were coming up, there wasn't proper notices. And I think, if we're gonna do this, with this one of amendment to the LDR, there should be an amortization period.
Yeah.
By which, if we say something gonna be non-conforming, they have to come into compliance. I mean, at least we do permit fees. And so to incentivize people to come, and then there should be mass mailing also. And I think, this is one of the issues, and I deal with them all the time. Building owners, for apartments, they come to the city and say they didn't know about this. And then, now they all being cited now. And then it's one thing, it's the code says it, but it's another thing, I think, we need to do, as a city, more effort, to go and notify those people. And I think, this, we can do better this time around.
Yeah, and when they wanted to take part of my mom's driveway, they did their due diligence to knock on her door, send letters.
Excuse me?
meet
Again,
her,
I was
sit
only
in her-
addressing about the multifamily, that are we gonna give them 14 years to come
No.
into compliance?
I-
But you
I-
already said that that's been
So the
struck.
recommendation
single family
should
that
be,
I'm
we remove the
concerned
last
with.
sentence,
You move with the last sentence.
and everything's fine.
Yes.
Right, it's already been struck and administratively.
And the single family situation is.
All right.
No, no.
Okay.
the
And here's my-
family are
Wait, wait,
exempt
wait.
forever to
Exempt
that.
from
And here's my last item.
Okay.
But it comes to the heart to a lot of this, of everything. It's the parking requirements that these 5 pages have, 3 pages have.
Which page are you starting with there?
Say page 127, 128, 129,
Right. Schedule of required parking.
130, 131. And just as an example, an adult living facility has to have 1 parking spot per bedroom. Those old people in the living room, in the adult living facilities, don't usually have cars.
I think we've changed that, let's
Okay.
clarify.
Let's clarify.
Okay, so,
I
but
thought we went to half.
That's elderly housing.
that's elderly. But throughout this whole chart,
Hold on, I'm sorry.
there's inconsistencies. That's an example, and then you have to have two
got a
two
page.
employee parking spots.
What page?
Oh, page 127.
For which one?
He's talking,
I'm just an example. Adult living facility,
right.
1 parking spot per bedroom.
Are you
Per
against
two,
it or for
eh,
it? What-
it's per two. This is being fixed
wants
also. It's supposed to be the same thing as CRH.
So
One
per-
per each 2 beds plus 1 per each 2 employees. This is what we'll propose. I think,
One
this,
parking space for 2 bedrooms?
yeah, it's one, per 2, for 2 beds plus 1 per each 2 employees.
2 beds or 2?
2 beds.
Because
Plus-
2 beds
plus
can be in
for-
1 bedroom.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, it can be
One
like,
way
parking space per
adults.
bedroom.
okay, so 1 bedroom, yeah. But we can, we just
So
go
it's
back
1 parking space per bedroom.
per bedroom, yeah.
Well, that's what it says.
Right now, it still says that.
Right?
Yeah, it's and then, but I
ACLF?
think we need to add, a 1 per 2 employees also.
All right, so we're going to go 1 parking space per 2 beds plus 1 per each 2 employees.
Exactly.
So,
So that'll
so
work
where
out
would the
fine,
ex,
too.
where would the other employee park?
I mean, that's just a whole calculation. That doesn't mean that they're going, every single employee gonna have 1.
They were creating
They
way
have to
too
do a
many
parking
parking
analysis,
spaces
yeah.
that
Okay.
were not, that weren't needed. And something, what's consistent in here, and, I'm not gonna go one by one, and Chairman wouldn't let me, but we have, for every 300 square feet, you have to have 1 parking space. And
Ridiculous.
and then they go back and forth, conflicting with other uses. Before it gets to the planning commission, it's easy to say, well, let's do a parking study and we'll deal with this later. But what happens is you come up with really nice new redevelopment rules, somebody comes and sees the parking requirements, they're gonna leave because the parking doesn't make sense when you have a 10,000 square foot retail spot, but you want them to have 50 parking spaces or an office space. We should go, and I pretty much went through where it all said 300 square feet. Almost every category should be bumped up to like 500 square feet because that's consistent with other cities. For a movie theater, it's 1 parking spot for every 4 seats. We don't have any movie theaters, and other cities have 1 for every 5 or 6 seats. I mean, that's how dictating it gets in here, and it gets very cumbersome. So if it was 1 for every 500 square feet of retail space, if it was 1 for every apartment building or 1.5, I'm not getting into the residential, but all this needs to be looked at before it gets to city council, because if we don't address these parking issues, a lot of stuff is gonna scare people away unless they gotta come back and get lots of variances for parking.
I
Well,
mean,
like
but
nursing- like
500
nursing and
square feet,
convalescent
that's a
centers.
little.
I'd like to hear from staff because I think
I
they
don't know
probably had a
about that.
reason. And
Yeah, I
if
don't know about
so,
that.
please enlighten us.
Here was
Debbie,
another
when
example,
you-
another
when you
example, real
wrote
quick, a
this-
nursing home, one
Sure,
parking
okay.
spot per bedroom.
We get it. Now, all right, staff,
I mean, the standards, for office and commercial, and Debbie can attest, it's 300. I mean, some cities going and go as far as 250, but it varies between 250 and 300. And even if you go to ITE, it's basically standard. But we do have, or shared parking, methodology that can be used when you have, different uses, that that share, one parking area, and then at different times. So we have that methodology that allows them, to reduce the amount of parking that they, without going through a variance process. And then this is all, through the development approval, DRC review, and they submit that shared parking analysis. But I think, yes, there's an issue with providing too much parking, but there's also an issue when you have enough parking. Like, for example, when you go to that Causeway Square down the street, and then you can go to Panera Bread, you can drive around for like 10 minutes before you find a parking.
Right.
But I think, those are the standards really in the field, but, and again, and then Debbie can add to that, we also have the shared parking, where, by which, which is another mechanism for developer to come and say, this is too much parking that may hinder my project. Okay, this is what we're proposing based on the uses that we propose, and then the time in which those uses will be operated.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
The shared parking, one of the best things that they have proposed, because of a mixed use, somebody's there in the daytime, maybe at night office, that's a shared parking, joint driveways, shared driveways, that all makes a lot of sense. But again, for a nursing home, that you have to have one parking spot for every nursing home room, the elderly people don't have that. For the
Yeah,
employees,
but
yeah.
they have guests.
They do have guests,
Family members
but
that come and
th-
have
but you also
cars,
have a requirement
and
for
they may have
guests.
more than one family member that comes and visits them at one time. I can understand that. I think maybe that might have been the thinking with that
Well-
you have a daughter and a mother, father, son, or whatever, and visits, and still allow enough parking for your staff also.
One of the challenges
don't
in
have a
changing your parking
All right,
requirements right now.
let me give you my thoughts on this. I don't think we can resolve this tonight.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, so let's end it. I think this part can be carried over to July, and we can have one night to just talk about the parking issues.
Very good.
Because whatever is done can be amended and rewritten by September or October. Kevin raises some good points. This has to go to council at some point, or we're all gonna be dead and buried before this ever kicks in.
Next week.
Next week.
We cannot deal with the parking tonight, but it's an issue that we need to revisit.
And again, you guys have addressed it, and so it's something that can come back because you raised it as an issue, and this way it'll get their attention
And
to
it's
start
the
looking
chair's
at it.
recommendation that this particular topic be carried over to a future meeting. You may.
So-
This is already.
Okay, what do we
I-
do,
I-
what,
Wait, point of order. Hate to play that card. So I think what you're trying to do is bifurcate the process, and what I think the city would want is to complete this process.
They're not gonna get what they want.
And start a new ordinance that addresses that particular issue.
Or in the alternative, issue the recommendation to mayor and council to review the parking requirements.
It's okay. That's kicking the bucket.
Yep.
Which is all right, because it's 11:30 almost, and it's just too complicated to get into these parking discussions tonight.
So you want,
It's a discussion that needs to be had. That's the problem, and we find ourselves in a position that's untenable now at this hour of the night.
right, so what's probably appropriate is a recommendation from the commission that the city council begin a further review of parking standards.
Perhaps even a public workshop on the issue. Or a joint workshop with planning commission before they take a final vote, because it's an issue that needs to be explored in depth, and we are not gonna be able to deal with it tonight. All right, that would be the recommendation. Do we have a motion?
so move.
So moved, second? Seconded by Ms. Belay, moved by Mike McDermott, all in favor?
Okay,
Okay.
we never cleared up the language on the 7 years.
We're taking
It
out,
was resolved by staff administratively removing that sentence.
You're
Removing
gonna
the
take
last
that out.
sentence.
Right.
Okay, so the
Right.
clock is ticking. So all these guys that don't have, these
No,
guys that are not.
No, they're grandfathered.
Yeah.
We're removing.
Whoa, no. Let's go back to square one here. You got, 7 years ago, we put this in the ordinance that all of these rental apartments have to have paved driveways.
Okay.
Are they gonna get another 7 years, or is that 7 years started?
It's done.
7 years is removed.
It's removed.
It's no
What do you mean
more-
it's removed?
We're taking out the last sentence.
Oh, the next 7 years.
The sentence
no
that
more
says 7 years,
Yeah,
goes away.
that's gone. So in other words, the people that aren't in compliance
They're in
aren't in
violation.
compliance.
They're in compliance. The
They're in
clock-
violation
clock
or they're
is ticking
grandfathered?
now.
They're not in compliance.
What
So they can
case
get a
is that
ticket
on?
now.
They're not in compliance.
Am I correct? I'm a little,
Well, now there's a discussion
you
between,
gotta remember the disabled vet, I don't know.
No, what case?
Okay.
You gotta take-
Yes, they
Alright.
can get a ticket.
alright, so we're agreed, Jennifer, you're agreed,
the
they're gonna
chief-
be cited.
They've been cited. and
They've
we've-
been
we've
cited,
had
okay, we can
prosecutions.
move
We've had
ahead
a
on
lot of
enforcement,
compliance,
okay.
but we've had a couple of naysayers, so.
Alright,
Yeah, they've been signed.
alright, what do we need to address tonight?
Okay, can I bring
Yes,
up my list?
I'll take this left to right if there's any remaining issues. Bob, I know you've got things.
No, there's a couple of little things.
Okay, let's take them.
Page 19, this is under the
Maybe
discussion
they
of
should
private non-commercial
add
dish
that
antennas.
as
Page
this
what,
whole
Mike?
video.
I'm
19.
assuming
Page 19,
They
sir?
need to
Page
change-
19.
Change that language.
the section that says private non-commercial dish antennas. I'm assuming that's like DirecTV antennas, correct?